where does musical grant program funding come from? The Clarence E. Heller Foundation is a generous supporter of the musical grant program. Other
Other
funding that supports the MGP, i.e., the dollars that awardees receive, are through unrestricted support of InterMusic SF programming garnered by staff and our board. They include the Mervyn L. Brenner Foundation, California Arts Council, Fleischhacker Family Foundation, William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, San Francisco Arts Commission, and Zellerbach Family Foundation. And we are very grateful for their support for this programming, which has awarded over $1.2 million in funding for nearly 400 projects here in the Bay Area. Yay.
Oh,
Next slide, please. The mission of the musical grant program is to promote the production and presentation of small ensemble music, including live performances, professional recordings, new work commissions for small ensembles, and multidisciplinary collaborations.
good.
It is designed to uplift local musicians in the Bay Area region. If you are awarded an MGP grant, you should 100% be seeking other grant funding. Our support is intended to holistically promote your work. And what I mean is that support from the musical grant program can help your project be more attractive for other grant funders. If you're thinking to yourself, yes, this mission describes the kind of program I am looking to propose, then you are in the right place. If you're thinking, I could maybe fit my project to fit this mission, then I would seriously consider that when preparing your application. Funder alignment is crucial when seeking funding. And if your program doesn't have alignment, it most likely will not be funded. So just take that into consideration. But I think you probably know if you're in the right place. Okay, let's go to the InterMusic SF website. So we're going to navigate. If you all want to navigate with us, you are welcome to do that. We're going to go to the homepage. So you can go to intermusicsf.org. That will take you to our homepage. I'm just going to wait for Mark to pull that up on his browser. And I'm doing this because there is a lot of information and I feel like it's a little bit challenging to navigate all of the ins and outs and it can be overwhelming. And so we want to just kind of lay out the landscape. So we're going to navigate from here to the musical grant program tab. And there's a drop-down menu for the 2025 grant opportunity. Once you are on this portion of the site, it is all dedicated to applicants. So this is all about how to apply and resources for you to prepare your proposal. From here, we're going to go to the timeline where you can view important dates. Applications are due on Monday, March 24th at midnight Pacific time. I'd like to quickly point out a term on this page, which is grant activity period. So this grant activity period for 2025 is July 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2026, which means you have 18 months to complete your fundable activities. And those activities have to be done during this period of time. If you have activities that have already been completed and paid for, you cannot apply MGP funds to cover those expenses. These funds are available to cover activities during the period listed. Next, we are going to navigate to the eligibility tab. Here, I would like to point out 3 items. We define a small ensemble as an entity with 1 to 25 members. which means that solo projects are eligible to apply as projects. I don't think that has been so explicit, so just pointing that out. An update to this year's application, we do not require project partners to be listed as applicants. If you are collaborating with a significant artistic partner, please include that information in the collaboration details question of the application. If you are an entity that was included on an MGP proposal that was funded in the prior year, but you were not listed as the main contact, you are eligible to apply for consecutive years. So this is a big change. We only have one applicant for each application. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, great. Next, we're going to scroll to the eligible applicants. So a little bit higher up. This is like the nitty gritty down here in the details. These are the straightforward definitions of eligible applicants. If you scroll down past these details, you will also find eligible projects of what we fund and what we don't fund. I'm assuming that everyone here has read through these eligibility requirements, that you are aware of the residency requirements of living in one of the 9 Bay Area counties. If anyone has questions about collaborators, I will just say one point is at least 50% of your artistic entity needs to live in one of these 9 counties. So if you have a guest artist and that's one person of a 4-person group, then it's totally fine. So that's collaborations, guest artists, they are funded. The grant cannot go towards funding travel for that artist, but can cover artist fees. Okay, let's navigate to the Apply tab. Okay, this is the trove of information. Once you've established that you are eligible for funding and that your project is eligible for funding, you can start the application process. Navigating to this tab, number 2 is where you will find the application templates. The MGP application has integrated with the Common App tool for your convenience. The Common App is an application used by 6 Bay Area performing arts funders. We all ask 90% of the same information in the same way with the same word count. So if you are already using the Common App to apply to other funders, you are 90% of the way to completing your MGP application. This application is really great because it's available year-round. Most funders like us only put out our application during the application cycle period. So we opened the application became available to download, and then we'll close it and it won't be available anymore. But you'll always have access to the Common App. And the Common App is basically, it stays the same. So it's a really valuable tool in that way where you don't have to wait for a funder to put out that year's application. You can get a lot of it done in advance. And you can also do it for several different projects. You could do it for general operating. And then when those opportunities come up, your proposal's already written and it's written tailored to at least these 6 funders, which is substantial, their applications. Okay. If you're not using the Common App, that's totally fine. It is not required in any way. In this case, you would want to download the MGP template either as a Word document or a Google document template. So if you want to just, Mark is going to click on the Google Doc button and it says make a copy. And this comes from, so this is now your personal copy. And it is generated and unique to you. You can work, use this as a place for word processing and prepare your application materials before moving to the platform. So at this time, I would like for everyone to access, who can access, access the template and be sure to download either the MGP or the Common App template at this time. And if you can like give me a swift thumbs up when you are good to go on, that'd be great. Awesome. Okay. Is anyone having trouble with this? Okay.
So just for like the common app,
That is for the Common App.
so for, it wouldn't be for the desk, it says desktop. I don't get my iPad, but, you know, for downloading it, yeah, what would I do?
I don't know how to do that on an iPad actually.
So where would that be?
Are you good to assist? Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate it. Okay, so next we're going to navigate to number 5, which is the application guidelines. Can you go back to the site? So number 5 on the application tab of the MGP website, it's number 5, which is application guidelines. So this section of the website is literally where you'll find the quote unquote answers to the test. This is structured like a study guide with insight and explanations as to what the panelists will be looking for when reviewing your proposal. And it also outlines what would make a strong proposal. All that said, the first thing on the application is a little bit tricky. So we have an activity planned for this portion to get you started. So part 1 begins with asking if you'd like to apply as an organization or as an individual artist. All in all, it is up to the applicant's discretion. What you should weigh is how much of the executive and artistic decision making is on your plate as the applicant. So if you're the only one who's producing the show and you are making a lot of the decisions, if not all of the decisions, you may, and you want to highlight the work that you do in the many groups and configurations that you play in, and your personal history as an artist, then you may want to apply as an individual. If you are in a group that has a set number of people and they also make decisions in how to move forward, and you also have some mentorship that helps guide you that you want to share about and a long history of performing with this group, then you may want to apply as an organization. So what we're going to do is take a moment, about 7 minutes. We're going to write an artistic statement as an individual of 1 or 2 sentences. And then we're going to do the same activity, but from the perspective of an organization with a mission statement in 1 or 2 sentences. So we will take a little bit of time. We'll come back at like 7:28 And if you could maybe write those 2 sentences, that would be great.
Basically, as an individual describing what you're doing then.
Your mission statement or artistic statement. So both of those, as if you were applying as an organization and as if you're applying as an individual. I'm going to write my own too. Okay. Does anyone need more time? Okay, we can have 1 or 2 more minutes. Okay. Um, I'm really curious. How many people felt more comfortable writing from the perspective of the organization? Okay. And how many people felt more comfortable writing from the perspective of an individual? Okay. Interesting. Um, it'd be great to hear from anyone if they had a strong or interesting experience. I have to repeat it back. That's the only thing. If anyone wants to share their experience.
I think in my case, both of the
So the same. So Robert just said that in his experience, they were very similar. The goals were the same, but the wording kind of changed. I think I'm in that bucket as well. Like it doesn't really matter, but it can change how you write. So the important thing here is that it's the very first thing that you answer, and the whole perspective of your proposal will be from that place. So possibly write from both angles and see what really comes more naturally to you. Um, we're going to want to hear the deep down stories. What makes you tick? Why do you do what you do in the Bay Area? So finding that voice is really important. And am I think we're all really aware of how this framing can affect that. Okay. I'm also happy to talk further with individuals about whether or not or how to apply. There really isn't a right answer, but it can take maybe some digging. Let's go to the slides. How did our virtual folks poll? Okay. Alrighty. So we are going to dive into the nitty gritty of the budget. And I kind of carved out a substantial amount of time to go over some terms that we see thrown around a lot, but maybe are still a little confusing. Um, and so we're going to spend more time on this than the narrative, and we can go back to the narrative if that is helpful. But I really think that some time on the budget is helpful. So the first term that we are going to look at is expenses, and particularly general operating expenses versus direct expenses. Expenses are things that you need to pay for X. In this case, And for our purposes, we are speaking exclusively about expenses that are incurred for musical activities. General operating expenses, in straightforward terms, cover overhead costs. Examples are any good or service that you pay for that is necessary for you to do your work in any capacity having to do with creating music. So that could be a portion of your cell phone bill, equipment, instrument repair and maintenance, office supplies, bank fees, bookkeeping expenses. These are also sometimes called indirect costs. And on the MGP and Common App budget template, they are called that. There is a line for indirect costs. And so these are the expenses that they are talking about, that we are talking about. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yes.
I did see on a previous slide that operating expenses are not covered.
So we're going to talk about the difference here. So there is a portion of indirect costs that can be considered for funding. It's usually around 12% of your total operating budget. So we have a line and we will accept a portion of the requested funding to cover those costs.
Say it was 12%.
Yes.
So do we figure that out? Like, do we take all the indirect costs and then take 12% of that?
So if I know this is going to be a section where we have a lot of questions, if you can hold your questions until the end, just jot them down and we will get there. But there's a lot to this flows very quickly. So the next term is direct expenses. Direct expenses are expenses that you've incurred specifically to produce a project. This includes things like artist fees, instrument tuning and cartage, venue rental, recording engineer fees, graphic artist fees, and more. All of the other things that we pay for to do a project. This leads us to our next term, which is the project budget. So when we ask for a project budget, we are asking to know all of the expenses expected, all of the expected or already received funding and all of your direct expenses to produce the project. So what are you garnering because of this project? And what are you spending because of this project? Direct project costs. You may say, I'm planning to do some work on my project and I don't plan to pay myself. If this service that you or anyone else is planning to provide and it's specialized and necessary for the production of the project, you can include this as an in-kind donation. Next slide, please. So if no cash is exchanged, this would go as an in-kind donation. Hold on to your seats. In-kind donations should be included in your project budget to account for the necessary goods and services needed to produce your project. They should not represent the actual cost or value of the donation received, but rather the fair market value of the good or service that you would have procured otherwise. So let's do a quick example. Rhea T. Dog is submitting a project proposal to produce a concert. She was looking into booking a venue, and by chance, a friend gave her access for free to use Davies Symphony Hall. How do we include this in the budget as an in-kind donation? The actual cost of using this particular space is $30,000, but she will only record the fair market value of a concert hall venue that would have been sufficient enough for her to produce her project. And that's only about $1,000. So even when you are given something that is of great value, you record in your in-kind donation only the portion that you would have spent otherwise if you had to include it in your project. So even though she has access to this hall, it's not really reflective of how much it costs to produce her project if she includes how much it costs to rent that hall. How much does it cost to rent a hall for 70 people in the Bay Area on a Tuesday night? Maybe $1,000 for, anything that you need. Does that make sense? Awesome. The in-kind lines are really important because you want to use them to show the actual cost of your project. If you're doing a bunch of specialized service like bookkeeping for your project or the graphic design work, or someone is putting in extra time and giving you the family rate, you want to account for that. If it's not up to fair market value, you want to show how much it really costs to do the great work that you're doing because you can fundraise for that. You want to know how much it really takes. Okay. Does anyone have questions? I know that one's a tricky one. Okay.
Would a performance bond or insurance then get considered as a direct cost or indirect cost?
So if you have, so did everyone hear the question? Insurance, it's an insurance for, so it's if it is event liability insurance that you would need to purchase to produce the whatever you're doing, your project, yes. If it is general liability or a workers' comp situation where you have an employee, some folks have employees, that would be an indirect cost. That is a general operating cost.
Okay. Does that clarify, please?
Yeah, did I? Sure, yeah.
So getting back like for Davies Hall with the 30,000 and then the average price of the general price for a rental that you would claim would be 1,000. In doing that, are we required to give the name of the specific hall that we're considering? Or just in general, what that price would be? In other words, do we have to have some examples of why it would be 1,000?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. So the question, if I understand it correctly, and please correct me if this is not correct, in the budget notes, when recording an in-kind donation of $1,000 for, in this case, a rental of a venue, would you quote the specific venue if you don't, do you have to include the specific venue even if you don't know it? No, you can say that this is a pending or it's your budget. So it is a best guess. Most budgets are best guesses and you try to just stay within those parameters. But no, if you haven't actually rented it yet, there's no way of knowing what the bottom line is.
That also applies, say, like if you're interested in a recording project and you're estimating your recording costs, could be in the studio, could be, say, $2,000, but you don't have a specific studio picked out yet, you can just list it.
So the question is, if in another case you are booking a recording studio and you're projecting the expense for that studio time, if you haven't gotten a quote, would you include that anyway? Yes. My advice is to get a quote from a couple and take the average, and look at your budget and say, I actually can't, I can spend half of that, and make some decisions. I mean, that would be a part of how you're going to make it work. And it might be the case where you have 2 days if you have a funder as a pending line of income. And on another application, if you have an additional funder, then you have 5 days in the studio. So you can kind of you can bolster your expenses as you bolster your opportunities of income. Does that make sense? So you might want to, if you got the musical grant program and then you take a look at the Hacker Foundation grant, you could say, I'm already planning to do 2 days in the studio. I got musical grant program with Hacker. I'll be in there for 5 days. That's what they would help you do. So that's how you would work those unknowns into your budget. And sometimes that's the scariest part about writing a budget is that there are so many unknowns. But what you want to do is make your best guess. What do you think is really going to come through? What do you think how can you use those funds and show the fair market value? Any other questions about that? Okay. We're going to go back to the website. Okay.
If web development, graphic design, and photography is donated, how would you determine the market value?
You would ask them what they would, I mean, so there are a couple of different ways. But essentially you would do the same thing. You would get quotes from a few local artists on how much the work would be to get a good sense of what fair market value is. And then you put that against the percentage of your budget and how much you are wanting to spend on those services and proportionally decide how much of the budget you're going to write towards those expenses. It's as simple as that. We're going to go to the website. I just want to, sorry for in-kind donations. I just want to say, I know a lot of us help make projects happen. We help our friends help us. I think it's really important to record that work. And if there is a non-cash donation, you'll want to show it on the in-kind donation line. And we'll go over this as well when we look at the budget template. But you'll reflect it on both the income and the expense side so that it zeroes out. There is no cash exchanged, but you do show the true cost. Okay, so we're back on the website and we are going to find our budget template. You don't have to use this template, but if you don't have one already, then this is where you can find a template budget sheet. You would go to the the apply tab, and number 2 with the application templates, there is a project budget template, and this is used by the Common App. And this template will open in Excel. It's an Excel file, but it will open in any operating system with a comparable application. And so once you have that open, you will see these empty cells for the most part, and they are already formatted for you. And we will maybe take a few, if you can download your budget template. If you don't have one already, please do so now. And once we have our template downloaded, we'll start to fill in our numbers. So there are a few rules to follow. You will want to include your income and expenses, not just your expenses, both of them. And they need to be equal and balanced. So what you plan to spend needs to equal what you plan to garner. You might be saying to yourself, what if I don't have funds secured? And I don't even know if I'll receive the musical grant program award. What do I do? How do I even go about this? So pending funds and secured funds should be listed here. So if you don't know, if it's not secured, if it's not a pledge, you can still include it as pending. So you would include the musical grant program and how much you're asking for in the income portion of this budget. So you're assuming you get funded and you include that here. If you're planning to run a crowdfunding campaign, you would want to base your goal on what you've been able to raise in the past. If you're expecting 30 people to help fund your project and you've in the past raised $2,500, you would include that here on the individual donation line, line 17. And you would state that in prose, in sentence form, in column H. I have ran a crowdfunding campaign in 2017 and I raised $2,500, so I am including that here. Those budget notes are really important. It gives the panel some insight into your fundraising history. The more you can include in those notes, the better. Seeing a lump sum and saying pending is not enough information for us, for them to know really how you're planning on going about this. If you're planning to apply to another funder's grant opportunity, you can list that here. And you would indicate that those funds are pending, and that would go on line 18. So your government agencies and your foundations, line 18. If you yourself are going to fill the gap, you would add yourself as an individual donor and you would say what that gap is. Like, I would myself contribute X amount of dollars to fill the funding gap. So those are not goods or services. Those are contributed funds. Even if they are from you, they belong on line 17. Also, if you're explicit about how much you're self-funding, it can also help your case, right? So we want to alleviate that from the artist. Yes. I'm just going to finish one additional thing about income is that ticket sales would be listed under earned revenue. That's line 23. Any workshops or contracted engagements that you or your ensemble have lined up in support of the project, that should be listed here as well in earned income. So if you're providing a service and you're getting paid, that's earned. If those are booked engagements, you should indicate that those are secured funds. So like if you're doing a local tour or you have a workshop at like a Bay Area college, you could say part of those funds are going to fund your next record. Okay, question?
Yeah, two questions. First one, do you want us to insert one line per fund proposed and pending grant? Like, if there's different individuals or different foundations?
You can if you would like. That's not necessary. You can add those together. You don't have to list out each funder if you don't want to. This is a standard template. This is how a lot of budgets are submitted. So we're not asking for more or less than any other funder would. This is kind of standard practice.
Cool. And as an organization, can the org contribute funds rather than individual?
Sorry, can you say that again?
As an organization, can the org contribute funds rather than the individual?
So I would see individual donations. If you have org donations, just create another line and call it institutional giving. That is not a foundation or a government agency. And so it would go under institution if you want to parse it out. It could go on either of those lines. And since you're preparing this potentially for lots of other funders, you do this kind of work and then you don't have to do it again for this project. It's just something you can hold on to. There's another template for general operating. So if you wanted to get those other funds, there are funders in the Common App that fund general operating costs. Okay. Any other questions about income? Yes. So if it's a specialized service, oh, sorry. Yes. The question was, what about your own hours and if you are doing a lot of the administrating for the project? So you would record those hours if they are specialized and necessary for the project on the in-kind donation line. When you record, okay, I'm going to get to that part on the expenses. I'm putting a pin in it. But I just want to make sure there are no other questions about income. So moving on to the expenses. In this section, it's broken up into three main parts: goods, essentially goods, services, and indirect, or like we covered earlier, general operating costs. Since this is one project of many of your activities in a year, you would only include the percentage. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say about indirects earlier, is that the best practice would be to include the percentage of indirects that reflects the percentage of your activities that are contributed for this project. So if this is one of three major projects, it would actually be like 33%. But also it has to be reflective of just a portion of your bill, right? It's not your whole cell phone bill, the way you would report them on your taxes. I think that's a good place. I will say that 12% is a good number when you're submitting, but it is your budget. So getting back to the in-kind donations, taking that pin out, once you have all of your cash income and expenses recorded, then I recommend starting to account for the in-kind donations. This is a very important part. If you include in-kind donations in the income portion of your budget, they must, all caps, be included in the expense portion of the budget for the exact same amount of money. So you can't make up for cash expenses with in-kind donations. So those things have to equal out. So let's say I contribute 15 hours of bookkeeping for my project and I donate my time and pay myself $50 an hour. That's $750. I would add this as an in-kind donation, and under the expenses, I would list $750 under indirect costs. This way, the lines cancel out, no cash is exchanged, but it best reflects the true cost of the project. Yes. So if I donate time and I calculate how much my time is worth, I can add that as an indirect contribution of let's say $750. I then need to also record that expense as a separate line on the expense side for $750. So it's $750 in as an in-kind donation and $750 out as an expense. So they zero out. If you say, I received $2,000 in in-kind donations and don't include those expenses on the bottom, it doesn't work. Like you're essentially recording cash, which you don't want to do if there is no cash exchanged. So what you receive in kind is what you spend in kind. Does that make sense? Okay. Great. Okay. examples. We're going to move away from budget. Is that okay?
For the income portion, will my application be stronger if I have pledged money from foundations versus only individual donations?
No. Yes.
Portion before this budget? Like, do I include it here?
That's a great question. Okay, that is a very great question. So the question is, what if part of my program has already taken place and already been paid for, but I still have a portion of the project to come that would be during the grant activity period? Is that right? So what you would do is include the entire project. You would say, so if let's have an example of commissioning, writing a piece. You're the composer. Your ensemble is going to perform it, and you've recorded it, and you need to release the record. So what you would do, and you need dollars to get it out into the world and have a strong marketing campaign. So what you would do is say, my project is to record this record, and a part of that is this marketing campaign. MGP dollars would go to fund getting the record released. Here's my timeline. Here's what's already completed. Here's who already paid for it. So those would be all secured lines. And then the portion that still has to go would be pending. Yes. Yes. So you would reflect the whole project. If your project is a recording and a release, and the recording portion has already happened, but it has not been released, that portion of the project is not completed. And those activities could be funded with MGP dollars. Yes.
You have to have some type of balance that you were talking about before between what's coming in, as a donation and what's going out as expenses. If you already have put some either money or time into it ahead of time.
The question is, if you already have income that has been dedicated to the project, would you include that in the budget?
Certain amount going in, 750 was coming in, it would have to be balanced as expenses of 752.
So the question is, if you have income that came in and expenses that income was applied to, would you record it in the budget? Is that right? Okay. Yes. You would record what you've garnered already and what you've spent already, what you have pending, and the activities that have expenses that are also pending. Yes. Sorry.
But with that, like, do I still report that? Because then.
No. So that is the tricky part of this conversation, is that MGP funds can pay for upcoming expenses that have to do with a large project. They cannot be applied to expenses that you've already incurred.
Hasn't been balanced out.
Your budget has to be balanced. Yeah. So how did you pay for, or how would you be expecting to, essentially what you're saying is, if I haven't been paid to write the piece, would I include that as an expense? You would include it as an expense if you had a funding source. And if you don't have a funding source, then it would be an in-kind donation.
Oh, because then under in kind, then we just balance it out.
Yeah. Like, I wrote this. I should have been commissioned $3,000. So here it is. I wrote this. Here's the in-kind donation. It's a very specialized service. But if you have more activities for that piece, you would want to include that and it's a part of this larger project, right? The piece is already composed. That's a big, that's a thumbs up. It's a tally in this project will get completed. It's already partially completed. So yes. Any other questions? The budget is a narrative. It should tie to your application. What you talk about doing, those activities need to be reflected here. So you don't want to include some things in your narrative that you talk about doing, and then you don't have them as expenses here, right? You want these two things to tightly tie together. They should be reflective in that story. Yes. I think if you know what your project costs to produce, that you don't have to be any granular than needed. So the question is about granularity and how much should you include on your budget sheet? So the question is, do you need to itemize each musician total amount for that budget line? From experience, and from the mission of the musical grant program, it is important to see that you're paying your players. This grant is for sustaining the careers of local musicians. So if you are paying them a substantial amount, you want to include that. It's a good point that you want to make. If you have an average and you don't really know how much, I would say on average. And you may say maybe a minimum that you commit to. I always pay a minimum of $125 per hour. Yeah, that would be in the notes. So I think it's a decision on how much you want to lean into the support that you're providing for your musicians.
Getting back to the idea of a recording project, the total amount that we could get, if we would get a grant on this, it would be $4,000.
So the question is about the maximum amount for the grant. Yes, $4,000 is the maximum amount for the musical grant program.
Question. It's like, if you find out, like, a spreadsheet, what that 4,000 would be, but then after that, let's say that's just for the recording itself,
This is a good question. So I believe the question is about how do you show what the musical grant program would specifically be funding? If you have expenses that are not fundable by the musical grant program, like the ineligible project items that are on the eligibility page, like travel for out-of-town musicians, and you have travel in your budget because it's a part of your project, you would just state in the notes where that funding is coming from. Like, this is funded by individual donations.
Got to the point where $4,000 is being spent just on the recording itself. That, when you're done with the recording, like, you would have, like, the template of it, or the Pro Tools or whatever. But if in your project after that, you want to contact, a company to get CDs made or vinyl records made, and that's going to come out basically out of your own pocket. Is there a limit, or does it make sense if you're going to spend $2,000 or $3,000 more?
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I think so this question about the budget is a little bit more detailed than I can grasp right now. And so we're going to take that offline, unless anyone, does everyone is that okay? I mean, I'm happy to answer the question now if it's helpful, but I think I need to move on because I'll take a little bit of time to answer that question. Is that all right? Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, any other questions about the budget? Okay, let's move on to the work samples. So for the musical grant program, you can provide up to 3 work samples, totaling 5 minutes of material to review. So total 5 minutes. So if you have a portion of a video or you have a 5-minute long video and you want that to be the full amount of time, just leave timestamps in the notes about your sample. Say sample 1 and then a starting point and an ending point if you do want specifics. If not, just leave it and they will listen to at least 5 minutes, the panelists. The other things that you can provide are, you can provide JPEGs, like images or documents. Work samples can be submitted using links to media, which we prefer, or by uploading JPEGs or PDFs, depending on what makes sense for your work sample and your project. And we encourage you to use the notes to describe how the samples relate to the proposed project. If you are submitting a score, please include the audio that that accompanies the score. So the question is, if you are submitting audio, is a score required? It is not. Yep.
You submit in those 3 samples, either video or just audio.
In the 3 samples, can you submit video and or audio? Yes. Video or audio, or both.
Totally 5 minutes.
Yes. Is there a media preference for video or audio for the musical grant program? So for our panelists and this project, I would say that there are a lot of applications that are for works or groups that are being formed specifically for the project that's being proposed. So you may not have recordings of the piece you're writing or want to write, or you don't have recordings of the specific personnel that you want to work with for the upcoming project. I would say submit what best reflects the proposed project. If you've worked with other folks, but it's the same kind of music, I would submit those as your work samples. If you have high quality audio, but the video is real crap, then go with the audio, like whatever is highest quality and kind of shows your work in the most favorable light.
Say like recorded quintet, you know, I'm a jazz musician, so like say like if it was for like 2 horns and rhythm section. And, you know, I don't have those particular musicians picked out for the recording yet, but I have samples of quintets that have been recorded that we've done. That would be sufficient?
Yes. So the question was about different players, but similar configurations and similar style and tradition. And that is yes, different players, that's fine. Any other questions? How are our online folks doing? Ew. Okay, cool.
If we're collaborating with a composer, don't you want one of the work samples to be representative of the composer?
Such a great question. Where did I
Thank you,
leave
Jens.
that? I don't know. I had that note somewhere. Maybe it's, I don't know where it is. Okay. Oh, if you have an artistic, here it is. If you have an artistic collaborator, you may want to reserve one of your samples for including their work, 100%. Any other questions? No. Okay. Yes, we want to know who your collaborators are. We're trying to lift the administrative burden on the project partners. And we're not wanting to know about them. We still want to know about them. We just don't want to have them so committed. Okay. Let's go to, let's say that you've completed your budget and you have your proposal all set. You have uploaded your work samples. Now it's time to submit the application. So for those of you who have not yet registered with AwardForce and you are able to access the internet now, it'd be great to get you registered. So we will go to navigate on our website where you can find that information. We're going to first go to the Apply tab and then go to Section 3, Submit Your Proposal on AwardForce. So this is where you would find that. Here you'll have links. This is the application portal. You would register by registering to any other thing. You just put in your personal information and you will be able to access not just our application, but any other organization that uses AwardForce. So you can see a history of your application, your proposals for all organizations, and you will have it automatically saves. It gives you a copy of your application when you're finished. These are all new things. These are like things that I'm really excited about. And I hope you are too. And I hope it's a much better experience than what we've had in the past. So feedback would be great about that. And if you want to, do you want to do that now? Is that a good thing to do now to get you started? It's just one more step closer. It's walking through the door. Okay, I guess you all can, I want to leave some time for some questions in case we need that at the end. So I'm going to keep moving. But that's how you access AwardForce. When you go on to the application portal, just one last thing, you will see the same exact questions from the MGP template here on the portal, and it'll tell you how many words you've used and how many you have left over. I really highly suggest working in a word processor to prepare your narrative before jumping into this. But when you're ready, it's there.
Yeah, and one quick thing, a lot of the material is conditional on you deciding whether you're applying as an individual or as an organization. So you won't see all of the questions that are on the application templates until you select that in
Yeah.
AwardForce, just FYI.
So what Mark is saying is that the AwardForce platform is conditional on whether or not you're applying as an organization or an individual. So there we are with that big distinction again. Okay, great. Alrighty, I just want to say a few other things about the panelists, and we just have a few more things. So can we go back to the slide deck? So our panelists are independent. So we don't review, staff and board do not have any hand in reviewing applications. Each year we choose 4 panelists that have expertise covering a diverse musical and cultural background, to be sure that we have panelists that are reflective of our applicant pool. They are anonymous because this community is very small, but they're fantastic. And decisions can't be contested, so they'll give us the recommendations for this year's awardees, and we will announce the awards in mid to late May. Yes, Chris. So that's another thing that we get with AwardForce. It's another way, this is going to make it way easier for them to leave feedback for awardee for applicants. So yeah, we're really excited about that feature as well.
There is a relevant question. What other organizations use the Common App right now?
Yes. So the other organizations using the Common App are Fleischhacker Foundation, Rainin Foundation, Theater Bay Area, Zellerbach Family Foundation, and Gerbode Foundation. Gerbode will not be funding musical programming until next year, but they fund individual artists like we do. It's just that their musical focus is every 3 years. Rainin has an application cycle that is about to open, and Rainin Foundation and Fleischhacker has 2 cycles per year. January 15th is the deadline for one of them, and July 15th is the other. That's the small arts grant. And Zellerbach has 4 application cycles per year. So lots of opportunities. That is a great question. Yeah. Resources. Can we go to the next one? We will be posting, it's not up yet, I apologize, but it's very close. We'll be posting a scoring rubric so that you can see what the panelists will see when reviewing your applications, and we'll post that to our website under review. There is an FAQ that has a lot of just specialized little questions that is really great. It's more about specific circumstances that we see come up a lot. And we kind of unpack those situations. The Common App webinar is 14 minutes. It's posted next week. It's already completed, but I think we're waiting for just approval from all of the Common App folks. So it's a 14-minute video on how to use the Common App alongside another organization's application. And that was made this year. And then there is a Common App workshop video that was made last year, which is like an hour and a half, but it's really informational if you want to check that out. And this will be posted to our website next week as well, in case you want to review anything. And the application deadline guidelines, I can't stress enough that number 5 on the apply tab, all of the answers, just maybe check that out if you have questions on how we're looking at these questions. Okay, now here comes the real pitch. Can you go to the next? Okay, demographic data. Yay. We're really interested in aggregating our data now that we are a part of a larger pool of funders. The Common App cohort is interested, and we are super interested as well, in aggregating the data for us to look at who is in the broader community, who is getting the grant funding of those who are applying. We are looking to uncover bias and where there are access barriers in our programs and processes. And we want to be able to respond to gaps in our outreach and support, and also build stronger technical assistance resources. So it's super important. If you could please do, we have a tool for collecting data. This data is not used to determine eligibility. No applicant has to contribute demographic data. It is really your choice. We just hope that you will participate and we can get one of the clearest views from all of these arts funders than we've ever had before. Can you go to the next slide? We understand that demographics must be self-identified. So you cannot answer for your ensemble mates. And so what we have done is We have a distributable survey to send to your immediate collaborators and ensemble mates to collect this data. And so that should make it a little bit easier to submit if you can. Next slide. We would love your partnership and hearing your feedback about this workshop. This is also a pitch for some additional engagement with all of you. So it's optional if you want to leave your name or be anonymous, but we would love to know how to make this better and what went well and what needs work. And now we will do the Q&A.
About, your overall organization, every year you have music day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a correlation in people that get selected for the music day to the people that are selected for grants?
It's really interesting. No, there are different panels and different selections processes. Sorry. Okay, so the question is essentially if you perform at Music Day, will you get a higher chance of getting a grant? And if you get a grant, will you have a higher chance of being programmed at SF Music Day? We do have last year's curator in the room. We have some performers from this past SF Music Day. There is a community that is built through SF Music Day, I believe. I think that it's a great way for people to get to know about the services and resources that we provide. Saying we are a fiscal sponsor isn't like the sexiest thing, but SF Music Day is really fun. And then through that program, we get to engage with artists even more and share with them these opportunities, grant opportunities. They're not connected in a formal way, in a programmatic way, in any way. That way, no. But you start showing up and you're a part of the community. Any other questions? This is the Q&A portion. So you can ask anything that we haven't talked about. Okay, Sophia?
The first one is how many awardees per year?
So the first question is how many awardees are there per year? So we are aiming to make 22 to 25 grants this year.
I saw that there was a guest artist, right? Invite like portion that you can do as a project, like that doesn't live in this country,
Yes.
right? Is that they have to be in another state? Does it have to be from the US or can it be from another country?
And the question is about guest artists and are there any residential requirements for those guest artists? There are only location requirements and residency requirements for 50% of your ensemble. So as long as 50% of the artists are based here in one of the 9 counties, then your guest artist can be from wherever. Yeah. You're okay.
The recording process, does it have to be local or can it be in another country?
So do the grant activities need to happen in the Bay Area or can they happen in another country? That is a really tricky question. Here, yeah. I think I'd have to ask some additional questions offline about that. Yeah. Right. So there are a lot of reasons why so the question is the question about which Bay Area counties your project will take place in a requirement of the project? I have not seen that as a requirement. There is a residential requirement. I would have to look at some dicey past awards to see where things landed because we're not looking to just change the mission of the grant program. The more activities that are here and the more collaborators you have in the Bay Area, the stronger your proposal. So even if it's not barred, if you're going against 60 other or 80 other applicants who have activities all in the Bay Area, that is mission aligned. So while it's not required, the alignment will be affected. I hope that makes sense. Woo. More questions? No? Yes? Oh, oh.
There were changes to the application. Just wondering, were there any changes to any of the questions in the letter recently, before, after the announcement was made of this grant?
This year's grant has not changed since posted. Yeah. Oh, I see. No, there were changes from last year's application. Yes.
Before a year and some months later, that would fall under, is there, there's a time that we're allowed? Something like December.
So the question is about the grant activity period. So the grant activity period is 18 months. It starts in July, on July 1, and then your activities need to be completed by December of the following year. So December 31st, 2016. In the past, that has been a moving date. We have set dates that are just in the calendar. So you can always rely on those dates as a frame of reference. Yes.
She had asked you about one project could be out of the country, right? What about out of this state? Like if you wanted to say record in New York, would that still be okay?
So the question again is about grant activities that are not happening in the state of California. And I would say the same thing, that if I will look, if it's not a requirement, it is highly unfavorable to not take place in the Bay Area. Yes. So the question is there any additional support for proposal when you're getting ready to submit your proposal? Is that what you're wondering?
My question is there any ever a time when if we were to apply to that, and by a miracle we actually get, say, we applied for 3, we got all 3, and that actually exceeds our income, then what? And then what happens? And if we basically just don't get here, that usually just means project is dead.
So the question is, if you apply to 3 funders and you get all 3 grant awards, but you haven't planned for the amount of expenses and you now have so much income, you don't know what to do with. You spend the money. You spend the money on music stuff. Yeah, you would just you would have another day of recording. You would have another rehearsal where you pay for, I mean, if you can't spend dollars for music, this is probably not the place for you. So you have to return funds if they are not used in the way that you specified they would be. You are liable. This is it's a legal contract that you would have with not just us, but all of your funders. Yes.
But let's say down the road, you're in the project, now you're arranging for specific ensemble. You've written for an ensemble, but it's changed. So is that something that you can push forward as a service rather than arranging?
If I understand, you're asking if arrangements, the service of arranging can be a funded grant activity. Is that right?
paid compositions are, music are.
And so if there's been a piece that's been written, but it needs to go through further revision to be presented in a different way by a different ensemble, would the revision be an eligible expense? Yes. Yeah. Any other questions? We are available, all three of us. Happy to answer any questions as they come up, as you start writing. I hope you're inspired by your own grant writing. I always get inspired when I start writing about stuff that, that really gets my fire going. So I hope you have a similar experience. We may have another question from online folks.
Just one more,
Okay.
RC. Could the grant be for a concert series for a project that has already been released?
Yes. So concert presentation is 100% a funded activity for the musical grant program. Not entire series. Yep. So the question was, so you would have to specify that this one grant is covering one performance of a three performance concert series. And the answer was yes. You would just want to specify what the grant is going to pay for. That is the biggest question here. That's what you really want to communicate in the plainest terms possible. Can you show us our virtual people? So the question is, if you have the same program, but you're looking to present it at several different venues, would you consider that an entire series, or is that something else? I personally would bill that as a tour. I would say a local tour. If it's the same program, but different constituencies and different venues.
I have a
So I would
question.
look at a series as like, there is a presenter that presents monthly concerts or something. And if you're looking to have all 12 months funded, that would not be fundable. But if you have a special thing for 3 of those concerts, because of XYZ, or maybe it's a special, like a work in progress or something, then that's how you would share those performances.
So that brought up, do you include all 3 concerts in the budget or just the one concert?
That's an interesting question. I think that if you're a presenter that's receiving pretty substantial like programmatic annual support from a few funders in the Bay, it might be in your best interest to say, I get funded. These people have funded me for, and in the narrative, say how long you've been funded for, and that this is a really strong concert series, and it's a staple of our community. The budget should reflect the narrative, and the narrative should reflect the budget. They should tie together. There's a story there. So does it help your proposal, or does it detract and look like, well, it's something we've never done before, but I want to do 15 concerts, and it's like, maybe just leave the ones that we're going to fund in your budget in that case, if that makes sense. So these are personal choices, but this is how that would maybe read. Yes. Can you assume that the rubric will inform a lot of these answers? I will say the application, hold on. The application what is it called? The application guidelines is gonna be the rubric. I'm just gonna rework that whole thing. It is all there in the guidelines. Like that is it's already determined. It's actually already posted. It's just not in the form of a rubric. Yes.
During the process of applying, if we gotta get, into some problems with like actually figuring out where to go next with it. Is there like a helpline that you guys would have that you could contact with?
So there's a question about when preparing the proposal, if there are roadblocks, can we have some additional support? Yes. MGP at intermusicsf.org, office at intermusicsf.org, Mark at, Crystal at, Tyrone at. We are all here to help.
One more.
Okay.
I have composed a piece for both professional musicians and high school students. If we perform it in schools, are those eligible for funding?
If these are publicly announced and publicly attendable performances, then yes. If they are essentially only open to one community and the public is not able to attend, then no. Okay. Is there a budget range? So there is no limit to your project budget. Our funding is from $2,000 to $4,000. So that's how much these awards are. Sometimes we see really large budgets for huge productions. And we fund a very small amount of that, but we want to see the full scope of the project. Is there any benefit for for proposing a project that would not be fully funded by the musical grant program? We want to see that other people are behind your projects and that other people are interested in funding. So if you have funders or you have proposed funders, you would maybe want to include that.
There's a very relevant question from Ian on this one. Two questions. Is the $4,000 max now open to all applicants versus the $3,000 max in prior cycles?
That is a
Because the
good
project
question.
partner. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So in the past, $4,000 awards were reserved for commission collaborations between a composer and an ensemble. We have lifted that restriction. So any proposal is eligible to receive the highest award amount of 4K.
Okay, and then two, project partners plus collaborators. Do individual applicants who don't have significant project partners or collaborators have to answer this question? And if so, how should we approach this question?
Okay, that's a great question. So when you're talking about the collaborators of your project, you will want to include all people and entities that function within our vibrant and beautiful musical ecosystem. If you are renting space from a venue or from a practice a workspace that is for making music or making art, you want to include that you are economically supporting the work of other artists and other creators within the Bay Area. So that's why we want to know about your graphic designer. We want to know about the recording engineers that you're using and if you're working with a record store to have them carry your release. We want to know all of that stuff. It's a network, and we want to kind of get a sense of where you function and who you're in essence also supporting. So that's how I would use that. If they're not direct artistic collaborators, there are still tons of collaborators that we all use.
take away what you said earlier, about having an average for an expense such as like, you know, for recording studio. If you check with, say, 3 different studios and you come up, you know, with the block time of like, you know, $1,000, you know, do you still want them listed as collaborators that way too?
So the question is, if you don't have, I think you're answering your own question, but if you don't have a collaborator, you can't list them. So if you have a partnership with a studio, then I would list them.
But not,
If you don't have, yeah, if you don't have anything already arranged, you can include it. Yeah. Yeah. I could talk about this for another hour and a half. We're just scratching the surface. Thank you so much to everyone who joined. Hi.
We'll post this up on our YouTube channel soon. And any other questions, please email me. Thanks, y'all.
So great to see you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
very.
Thank you.
Thank you.